Good morning, everyone. Great to see you all here this morning. Thanks for being here. I don't know whether it was easy for you to come along this morning or it may have been hard physically, mentally. However easy or difficult it was for you to be here this morning, it's good that you're here. It's good to see a room full of people who are starting their week with worshipping our Creator and our God. I butter you up there because I got a tough lesson this morning. Today we're talking about wealth and possessions. I work all night, I work all day to pay the bills I have to pay. Ain't it sad? And still there never seems to be a single penny left for me. That's too bad. Can you pick what I'm saying here? Can you pick the song? In my dreams, I have a plan. If I got me a wealthy man, I wouldn't have to work at all. I'd fool around and have a ball. Money, money, money. Must be funny in a rich man's world. Money, money, money. Always sunny in a rich man's world. All the things I could do if I had a little money. It's a rich man's world. That's what ABBA said. ABBA telling us in no uncertain terms that life is easier with more money. If you can get more money, whether you save up for it or whether you have to buy into some money, life would be easier. It's always sunny in a rich man's world, according to ABBA. That's what Madonna says too. Some boys kiss me, some boys hug me. I think they're okay. If they don't give me proper credit, I just walk away. They can beg and they can plead, but they can't see the light. That's right. Because the boy with the cold, hard cash is always Mr. Right. Because we are living in a material world and I'm a material girl, she says. The exact same sentiment as ABBA, isn't it? The boy with the cold, hard cash is always Mr. Right. Because life is easier with more money, isn't it? That's what ABBA says. That's what Madonna says. That's what Billy Joel says. I want that easy, easy money. That's what the song from Fiddler on the Roof is all about. If I were a rich man, all the good things that would come to me in my life, all the ease that I would have in my life if I had more money. Or if you're under 30 and you don't get any of those song references, and maybe you've heard Bruno Mars' song, I Want to Be a Billionaire, where he spends a whole song talking about how great life would be if you had $1 billion. The message is clear. I had to limit that because there were more and more and more songs that have the exact same message to it. More money makes life what? Easier. Right? That's what our culture says. More money makes life easier. And what does Jesus say? He says the exact opposite is true. More money actually makes life harder. That's what he says in Luke 18 and verse 24 when he sees the rich young ruler and he loves him and he says not how easy, how hard is it for those with wealth or those with riches to enter the kingdom of heaven. According to Jesus, more money does not make life easier. Oh, sure, it might be easier paying the bills. It might be easier making friends. It might be easier impressing people. But it is harder in precisely the most important thing in life. In fact, you could say the only important thing in life is harder with more money. Notice here, he's not talking about loving money, although that is a problem that is dealt with in other scriptures. But just the problem that he deals with here is having money makes it harder. Not even loving money, just the fact of having money will make it harder to enter the kingdom of heaven. ABBA, Madonna, Billy Joel, Bruno Mars think that life is harder if you're poor. And Jesus says in eternal matters, it's actually harder if you're rich. But we don't talk like that, do we? When was the last time you asked someone, how are you going? And they said, well, to be honest, life is hard right now because I got a big, fat, whopping paycheck. I just came into tens of thousands of dollars of inheritance, so life is difficult. No, of course, we don't talk like that, do we? We say life is hard because I'm just scraping by. Life is hard because I can only just pay the bills. I'm not trying to trivialize or downplay that poverty is hard, right? It is difficult to struggle with money. It is hard to not have enough money to pay the bills. But Jesus would say, as hard as that is to pay bills and scrape by on a low income, etc., poverty tends to push people away from, poverty tends to push people towards Jesus, and wealth tends to push people away from Jesus. That's what James says in James 2 and verse 5. He says, has not God chosen the poor of this world to be rich in faith and to inherit the kingdom he promised those who love him? And so here we are in one of the richest countries in the world. Here we are where if you are an average Australian earning an average income, you are in the top 5% richest people in the whole world. Even if you're a low-income earner in Australia, you're still almost certainly in the top 15% richest people in the world. So we need to be very sober-minded when Jesus says it's harder. It's hard for people who have wealth to enter the kingdom of heaven. Right? Sometimes our attitude to riches is more closely aligned to ABBA and to Madonna and to Bruno Mars than it is to Jesus. This morning we're looking at 3 warnings that Jesus gives about having wealth and our relationship to that wealth. And I put them as 3 questions. The first is, where is your treasure? The second is, how is your eye? And the third is, who is your master? Let's go through them one by one. The first one, where is your treasure? Matthew 6 here, let's read again verses 19 to 21. It says, do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven where neither moth nor rust destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Let's start by clarifying what Jesus doesn't mean when he's talking about wealth and possessions. He doesn't mean that it is sinful to have money. He doesn't mean that having sin or having possessions or having wealth in itself is sinful. He's not saying that. There are many people in the scriptures that we see, many good God-fearing people in the Bible who had wealth and were faithful. There's Abraham, there's David, there's Job, there's Joseph of Arimathea, there's Zacchaeus. These were people who had wealth. And they were faithful, not because of that wealth, but in spite of that wealth, they were still faithful to God. But again, these people are the exception, not the rule. The rule is not that if you have wealth, it's easier for you to be faithful. The rule is that if you have wealth, it is hard to enter the kingdom of God. So there are many people in the Bible who follow that second path, who can't overcome the allure of riches and who forfeit their souls because of wealth. You think of Achan in the book of Joshua. Do you remember? He ended up, it cost him his life just for a coat and for a little bit of silver and gold. You think about the rich young ruler who literally walks away from Jesus because he loves his stuff. You think about Demas, Paul's friend, who surely knew the gospel and knew the importance of having a focus on heavenly riches, spending so much time with Paul, and yet he forsook him in love with the present world. So the first thing is that Jesus is not here condemning having wealth or having money or having possessions. That doesn't mean that you are sinning by having those things. So what does it mean here when Jesus says, don't lay up for yourselves treasures on earth? The word treasure there in the Greek is literally thesaurus. It's the Greek word thesaurus. So you know what a thesaurus is? It's one of those books that you get that it's like a dictionary, but instead of giving you a definition of a word, it gives you other words similar to that word. And so a thesaurus is a huge collection of words. It's a storehouse of words. And so that's what this word treasure means. It means a collection. It means a storehouse. It's the idea of having a lot of things and storing them all up and keeping them all for yourself. It comes from the Greek word to save. Because you store up, you save things, you collect things, and that's your treasure. And you might say, hang on, what's the problem with saving things? My mum and dad taught me that, saving money is the wise thing to do. And yet Jesus is talking here about how saving up treasures is the wrong thing to do. So how do we make sense of that? The difference here is very clear. Jesus says sometimes saving money can be unwise because if you're saving up treasure that can be stolen, that can be eaten by moths, that can be corrupted by rust, it shows that you are saving up the wrong kind of thing. 2,000 years have gone past, and are Jesus' words irrelevant? Do thieves no longer break in and steal? Look at the door at the back there. 2 weeks ago, we had thieves break in and steal. Or at least they tried to steal. Thankfully, we don't store up treasures here, and so they couldn't take anything from the building. Basically, they took nothing. But the thieves still break in and steal, don't they? And you might say, well, at least we've got banks these days. At least we've got superannuation. At least that's trustworthy. But is that really trustworthy? Now look at this article from 2 days ago from The Guardian. Australians lost $1 billion through collapsed investment funds. What happened and how can workers keep their super safe? The subtitle, more than 12,000 people were exposed to 3 major failed schemes. Here's how to lower the risk of facing a similar situation. Is your superannuation safe? The Guardian wants to give you some ways to make it safer, and Jesus says, here's how you can make it safer. Stop investing in earthly treasures. Here's how you can be safe. It's not that you shouldn't have any treasures. It's just that we should invest in things that actually last. Even the money in our bank account. You can have tens of thousands of dollars in your bank account, and we live in a very fragile economy. If the economy collapses tomorrow and if inflation goes through the roof, then suddenly that money that we've saved up can be worth virtually nothing. So as we're going about our week, a good thing to ask as we browse realestate.com for houses and as we walk through Grand Central and look at the shops and as we scroll through Facebook Marketplace or carsales.com or op shops or whatever it is, a good question to ask is this: am I spending my time and my money on things that truly last? Is this thing that I'm looking at going to matter in 100 billion years from now? And if not, maybe I could better spend this time storing up treasures in heaven. So how do you store up treasures in heaven, though? If I told you, go out this afternoon and store up some heavenly treasure, how do you actually do that? Right? The answer is found in 1 Timothy chapter 6. Turn with me to 1 Timothy chapter 6. And Paul gives us 3 ways to store up heavenly treasure. 1 Timothy chapter 6, we're going to read verses 17 to 19. First Timothy 6, verses 17 to 19. It says, as for the rich in this present age, charge them not to be haughty, nor to set their hopes on the uncertainty of riches, but on God, who richly provides us with everything to enjoy. They are to, here you go, here's your list. They are to do good, to be rich in good works, to be generous, or your version might say willing to give, and ready to share. Thus, storing up treasure for themselves as a good foundation for the future so that they may take hold of that which is truly life. You notice there in verse 19, your version might say storing up, or it might even use the word treasure there. This is the same word that Jesus uses back in Matthew chapter 6, saying this is how you store up heavenly treasure. You do these 4 things that he mentions. You do good, you be rich in good works, you be willing to give or generous, and you be willing to share. That's how you store up heavenly treasure, those 4 things. That's what Jesus instructs the rich young ruler to do. Do you remember? Jesus looked at him and loved him and said to him, you lack one thing. Go and sell what you have and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. And come follow me. Jesus doesn't say, your problem is you have treasure and you shouldn't have treasure. No, the problem is you've got the wrong kind of treasure. He's simply saying, don't invest in things that don't last. And your life is filled with earthly treasures, things that thieves can steal, that moths can eat, that rust can corrupt. Jesus is saying, be wise with your money. Be wise with your investments. And we often think that being wise with money is about saving it. And Jesus says, well, actually being wise with money is mostly about giving it away and sharing it. That's what it means to be wise with our money. All right, so the first question is, where is your treasure? The second question is, how is your eye? Let's go back to Matthew chapter 6. Matthew chapter 6. Now, this is a bit of a confusing one because Jesus uses a figure of speech here that we don't use. So it needs a bit of explaining. Matthew chapter 6, verses 22 and 23, it says, the eye is the lamp of the body. So if your eye is healthy, or your version might say whole or singular or something like that, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light in you is darkness, how great is that darkness? Okay, so we don't have this figure of speech in our culture, but in Jewish culture, the idea of having a bad eye was a common metaphor for people who are stingy. You have a bad eye, meaning that you're looking at the world and thinking about what you can get from it. Let's go back to Deuteronomy chapter 15, and you can see it in this passage. Deuteronomy chapter 15 is all about how you treat the poor. And it's talking here about, do you remember the Jews, every 7th year, they had to forgive all of the debts. They had to let the slaves go free in the 7th year. And this passage is dealing with that and making sure that you have a good eye when it comes to forgiving debts and being generous to the poor. It says in Deuteronomy 15, verses 7 to 9, if among you one of your brothers should become poor in any of your towns within your land that the Lord your God is giving you, you shall not harden your heart or shut your hand against your poor brother, but you shall open your hand to him and lend him sufficient for his need, whatever it may be. Take care lest there be an unworthy thought in your heart, and you say, the 7th year, the year of release is near. And notice this, and your eye look grudgingly on your poor brother, and you give him nothing, and he cry to the Lord against you, and you be guilty of sin. So in the English Standard Version there, it says your eye looks grudgingly, or if you've got a King James Version, it says your eye is evil, or if you've got an American Standard, it'll say your eye is malicious. This is this idea, if you look at your poor brother, and instead of looking at what you can give, you're looking at, do I have an opportunity to take advantage? Do I have an opportunity to get something in this situation? Then your eye is bad. You've got a stingy eye. Look also in the Proverbs with me. Let's look at some passages here to see this bad eye and this good eye that the Jews used to talk about. Proverbs chapter 28 and verse 22. Proverbs 28 and verse 22. Now, if you've got an ESV, it'll say a stingy man here. If you've got a King James or a New American Standard, it'll say a man with an evil eye. That's what it literally is in the original language. It says in Proverbs 28:22, a stingy man, or a man with an evil eye, hastens after wealth and does not know that poverty will come upon him. So there you go. There's the evil eye. If you've got an evil eye, you hasten after wealth. You're looking to see what you can get from the world. Look at Proverbs 23. This is a funny proverb. Proverbs 23, verses 6 and 7. This is about being careful who you go to dinner with. So if you've got lunch plans today, pay attention to this proverb because it tells you who you should and shouldn't eat with. Proverbs 23, verses 6 and 7 says this. Do not eat the bread of a man who is stingy or who has an evil eye. It says, do not desire his delicacies, for he is like one who is inwardly calculating. Eat and drink, he says to you, but his heart is not with you. This seems to be talking about the kind of person that has you over for dinner and says, here you go, I've cooked this beautiful lasagna, help yourself, and you help yourself, and then you go back for seconds and they think, oh, that's a bit much. And then you go back for thirds and they think, where's my leftovers going to be tomorrow? This person keeps on eating all my food. So the Proverbs say, don't eat the bread of a man who's got a bad eye, because his heart is not with you. All right? He's calculating in his heart about all the food that you're eating. So the point that Jesus is making when he says, if your eye is good, your whole body is filled with light, is to say the way that you look at the world, whether you are stingy, looking at what you can get, or whether you are generous, looking at what you can give, that will affect whether your whole body is filled with light or filled with darkness. And if it is darkness, how great is that darkness, he says. Here's what it looks like to have a good eye in Proverbs 22 and verse 9. It says here, Proverbs 22 and verse 9, whoever has a bountiful or generous eye will be blessed, for he shares his bread with the poor. So Jesus is saying here, as you look out into the world, look generously, look with a good eye, and your whole body will be filled with light. Here's our final question today. We've looked at where's your treasure. We've looked at how's your eye. Question number 3, who's your master? Back in Matthew 6 and verse 24, no one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money. Does he say you should not serve God and money? No, what does he say? You cannot serve God and money. God demands our complete devotion, and eventually our money does too. Reagan Rose, in an article titled The Deceitfulness of Riches, he said this, money is not an easy master to serve. The dollar is a hard master indeed. She is fickle. She will raise your hopes on the upward slope of the stock market, then dash them down the valley of the next market dip. The dollar will promise you happiness if you but sacrifice your family and friends to gain a little more of her. But in the end, she will leave you alone and broken. Worst of all, the dollar promises a life of ease and comfort, surrounded with all your favourite things. But as the old adage goes, before you know it, the things you own begin to own you. Every possession, every investment, every business requires more and more of your attention to hold it all together. And soon, what felt like freedom begins to feel like slavery. Money is a hard master and will leave you exhausted if you choose to be its slave. It's true. There's an option here between two masters, and one is hard and will enslave you in all kinds of difficulties. And the other master says, come to me, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Those are the wrong verses, ignore that. The world says that being rich is easy. Being rich is easy. And there's one final reason why that's wrong. It's because, according to the Apostle Paul, Jesus was rich. But did Jesus have it easy? Of course not. His riches did not lead to a life of ease and luxury. His riches led to a life of sacrifice. 2 Corinthians 8 and verse 9 says, you know the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, that though he was rich, yet for your sake he became what? He became poor, so that you by his poverty might become rich. Everyone wants to know how to be rich, but the gospel is not here to tell you how to become rich. The gospel is here to tell you how to become poor. You know what I mean by that. The gospel is not about accumulating treasures on this earth. The gospel is about using whatever wealth we have, using whatever possessions we have, not for our own pleasure, but to give and to serve and to share with those in need. So this week, as we go out, and as we live in a culture that says more money is better, more money is easier, let's make sure we're listening to Jesus more than we're listening to Madonna and ABBA and Bruno Mars. Let's discern between what is lasting and what is perishing, what is certain and what is uncertain. And may God help us with our wealth. It's not sinful to have money, but it is hard, and Jesus knows that it's hard, and that's why he says, with man it's impossible. But with God, all things are possible. Thanks, Andrew.